Hi there, I'm Linda and this is Huttons Valley Permaculture. Well, I've been mostly working in the house of late and haven't been in my very neglected garden. This week I wanted to change that, so I've been in the garden for the last couple of days, and in this video I'll show you what I've been up to, show you what the garden's doing and what I plan to get done, and hang in until the end if you'd like to see what I've been doing in the house. So as we head up into the garden, the first thing you'll notice is the beautiful comfrey. It's really come to life now with some warm weather. The bees are loving it, but it's at this point that I like to chop it down and use it as mulch directly where it is and also through the garden. If I get it now, it doesn't have the seeds and it won't spread. If you can get comfrey, that's a sort of a seedless variety, you won't have this problem that I've got. I got this for free from a friend, and while it is beautiful and produces lots of plants, it can spread to areas that I don't want if I'm not careful. So that's something that I can't leave. I've got to just do that as soon as it needs to be done. Also coming to life in the garden is the beautiful globe artichoke. Now I've got lots of flowers and I've got this green variety, and down the other end I have a purple variety as well. The plants are really vigorous and putting off lots of flowers that could be harvested, and there's certain ways you can preserve those, but you can also just sort of steam them and have them as a vegetable fresh. This perennial bed also has lots of asparagus plants. Some plants are older than others, so some I can harvest from and others I've had to leave for a few more years. This one here is one of my younger plants, as is this one. But just over the back there, where you can see a lot of the ferns already, is one of my older plants, and I've been harvesting a lot of asparagus from that. Also, something to get excited about in this garden are the strawberries. During winter, these plants really die off, but it's at this time of year, it's the middle of October, that they start to come to life again. And it's hard to beat the birds to them at this time of year, and also the blue-tongued lizards, but there's certainly plenty to go around, and eventually I get my share. The bees are helpful with these as well. As we enter the garden, you will notice this beautiful flower here, and it's a variety of California poppy. I've mostly got the orange varieties, but I thought last year to get started with a different variety. And now this plant has sort of taken off at the front of the garden here. So I'll be leaving that to spread its seeds around, because wouldn't that be beautiful to have all of those lovely flowers spread throughout the garden. I've recently moved my TP trellises. They had beans on them further down the garden last season, but I've moved them to this edge, and I've got some snow peas growing around the base. I wasn't great at getting it growing up the trellis, so a lot of it's fallen over there with the winds, but they're starting to hang on to each other, and I'm sure they'll find this structure. And if I find some time, I'll try and help train them up a little bit. I threw in a few spinach seeds not too long ago, and they're starting to come up here. And moving down past my trellises, I've got what was once a carrot bed. I'm leaving some of these to flower because the insects really love it. I will be clearing out a lot more of these plants when I get some other plants to put into the ground, but I'm not going to take them out too soon. And just further down here, I've cleared out this garden bed. It was full of weeds. Now, it's really important to get out into your gardens before the weeds flower and set seed and spread those around, because I don't want these weeds everywhere. There's still a few in the garden that I've got to clear out, but I don't want to clear these plants out too early. What I've been doing is taking plants like this and feeding it to my chickens each day, and in that way I've kind of been maintaining some areas a little bit. So before I plant out this area, I will have fed all of this to my chickens. One particularly wild bed in my garden is this one here. It's where I grew quite a few chilies and capsicums during the summer season, and I've mostly let it do its own thing. A lot of these plants were self-seeded brassicas. Now, they kind of got a little bit mixed, so they weren't one type of brassica or another. Again, it was great chicken food. I pulled off a lot of those leaves and fed them to the chickens. And at the moment, it's bee food. So lots of flowers for all the insects, and you can really hear the buzz around here. They just love it. There's also been lots of aphids on these plants, and now I'm finding an abundance of ladybirds. They're coming in because the food is there for them. I do love spring when these plants start to flower and the garden just goes a little bit wild. The insects love it and I love it, and I actually find it really difficult to cut these plants down and move them on. I will be doing that as soon as I've got my capsicum and chilli plants, but I don't usually get those in the ground until sort of mid-November to the end of November because it's really quite cool until then, and they don't take off before then anyway. And now to my garlic patch. With my garlic, I usually harvest it sort of between now and mid-November. They are getting a little bit larger, but as you'll notice, there's a lot with this rust on them, so I don't expect them to grow too much. Last year I did have the same issue and I wasn't sure when to harvest a lot of these plants, but I'll leave them in for now and we'll just keep an eye on them. They were covered with weeds the other day, so I did get out in the last couple of days and get this garden clear, so at least they don't have that to deal with as well. And just beyond the garlic patch, you'll notice there I've still got my tin on that garden bed. I haven't done anything to plant it out, and I've still not done anything about that end garden. This is the garden bed on which you might recall that I had the green manure. And there's no sign of it there now. And you can see it's pretty much devoid of vegetation. Some of the sorrel is struggling to get going, but I'll probably get those out. But I might get this tin off, get it planted and get it mulched and get it back to life. You can certainly see my Brussels sprouts have finished and probably need pulling out. There's various weeds in this garden bed that need to be removed, but it is home to some little creatures that we love to see in our gardens, and that's why I struggle to move on a lot of these wild garden spaces because of those insects that are so welcome in gardens. Now this is a woolly vetch, and that was part of a green manure. It's starting to flower now, and we really should be stopping it. It's not putting on any more growth and putting all the energy into their flowers, and will soon be seeding. So I don't want that spreading around too far and wide. So I better get this garden sorted fairly quickly. An area of the garden that I did deal with recently, a couple of days ago in fact, was my compost path. I turned it into a compost potato patch, and a couple of days ago I did the harvest. Now I managed to pull out quite a number of potatoes. Most of them were fairly small, as you'd expect with so many plants all in the one space, but because of the nutrients available, the plants really did quite well, and I got 2 big buckets worth. And you can see after the harvest, I'm left with a path that I will be able to use to get some plants going for summer abundance. One of the reasons I wanted to get my potato plants out was for these little beans. I've been popping in bean seeds over the last few weeks just as I've been passing. I've still got bean seeds hanging off the trellis, so I've just been popping them out and putting in the garden. Quick and easy gardening, and you can sort of see some of them have already come up. I've got a few peas growing on a trellis. These ones are a potting pea, so I could probably just about harvest a few of those. And right next to them is one of my echinacea plants that's already coming to life and already starting to form some of the beautiful flowers that are so colourful during summer. On the other side is my fennel, most of which is starting to flower. That's the older plants, but some of the younger plants are still just forming the bulbs and will be harvestable fairly soon. Just here are my broad beans. I put in the seeds before winter, and I think I showed that in one of my videos. Now these plants are getting quite up there and starting to produce the little beans. I usually like to double pot them when the beans are really large. So they've still got a way to go, but I'm expecting a bumper crop from these because, as you can see, there's so many beautiful flowers. And to hold these plants up, I've just been using some of my steel mesh fencing that I usually use for the sheep, and that seems to hold these plants up really well. We've recently been having our spring easterly winds, and while some of these plants are sort of hanging out the sides, the bulk of it is being held up. So I'm finding it's all sort of staying up quite nicely. It's the second year that I've tried this, and I think I'll be doing it for each year after this because it works so well and it's so easy. In the last couple of days, I have managed to get into the garden, and this is one of the garden beds that I've recently weeded. It was covered in weeds and just old seeding plants, so I've cleared those out. Because I've taken potatoes out of the garden path, I've now planted another just to keep the potatoes coming along. And I've planted two different varieties. I've planted a Sebago and a Desiree. Now, I did buy in some fresh seed potatoes, and this is an area of the garden that I haven't planted potatoes before. So I'm hoping to avoid that sort of the scabby look that some of my potatoes had last year. Although I really didn't find that being an issue in my compost path, which was interesting because it was a lot of those potatoes from that garden bed that were affected that I threw into the path. Heading down the garden away from my potatoes, this will be one of my tomato beds. Now I haven't got that ready yet, but yeah, I'll be doing that soon. But I don't get my tomatoes in until the end of November. I've really only just got my seedlings going and they're very small at the moment. I'll be potting them up soon and getting them a little bit bigger before I get them in the garden beds. And this is another of my tomato beds, well, future tomato beds. At the moment, they're a brassica bed, which I did plant a fair while ago, hoping that these would be finished before I get my tomatoes, well, before I need to get my tomatoes in, and I think that's going to happen. I've got broccoli here that are starting to form heads. I've also interplanted with some spinach plants. Some are small and some are certainly big enough that I can harvest from them. I've got various green cabbages that are just starting to heart up, and also the beautiful red varieties. As you can see, it's very small at the moment, but hopefully it won't take too long to form a nice head. Now, come the end of November, I'm hoping that a lot of these plants will be finishing off, but if not, I can sort of sneak in some little tomato seedlings to get going in the meantime. Now, other than those plants that I put in a few months ago, I really haven't done any planting, and I've been relying really on volunteers. Here I've got some volunteer green lettuces, which are looking really lovely, and they'll be ready to eat soon. This volunteer cos lettuce has really hearted up nicely, and I reckon that'll be first out of the garden. I've got rocket, which is great to add to a mixed salad. Radicchio. Frilly leaf endive is still looking okay. And I've got the beautiful red oak leaf lettuce, which is huge. I might grab that with my cos lettuce for a salad. And this lettuce here, it's got a long leaf. It's one of my favourite lettuces, and it's made a return to the garden. I haven't planted this. It's just decided to regrow, and I'm thankful it has because it's a really lovely lettuce. And there seems to be plenty of this around. This little patch of garden is actually part of my tomato bed. But it's still 6 weeks off planting that, so I don't mind this colourful display of California poppies and some lovely salad greens growing in this space. One garden bed that's high on my list of priorities is this garden bed here. It's usually my cucumber bed. I'll grow cucumbers up here. It might be a little bit early to get those in just yet, so I might get some snow peas going and then follow with some cucumbers. But I do have to clear out all this vegetation. There's lots of parsley here. It's also a parsley bed, but it's a bit of a wild space at the moment. I have to move some of this off because I've got another lovely echinacea growing here that will need to spread its wings fairly soon. But it's definitely hard moving on all this beautiful colour. And if I want to get something producing in this garden, that's exactly what I've got to do. There's a few beetroot coming along in a couple of different places. This one definitely needs to be weeded though. This here is what I usually grow beans on, but at the moment it's growing weeds very nicely. They're going to be seeding soon, so I'll have to rip all of those out. This garden bed has what remains of my beautiful celery. That's kept me going all winter, and now it looks ready to go to seed, which I think I'll let it do. I don't mind some seeding plants, spreading the seeds around and growing the new plants fairly easily. My garden does a much better job growing plants than I do from seed. And just here I've got my carrot patch, which has finished now. The carrots are gone woody and they're sending up their flower heads, which I think I might just leave. I was going to turn this into a sweet potato patch, but my sweet potato slips failed. They all went a bit mouldy for some reason and I didn't succeed. So I mightn't grow any sweet potatoes this year unless I buy a few from the nursery to put in, but at this point I might just leave this as a little wildlife sanctuary really. This is my patch of chamomile that volunteers here each year in this space, and from where I dig up plants and move them to other areas in my garden. I had planned on moving all of this on for that sweet potato patch, but I just didn't get to it. Down the end are a bunch of onions that I've left to flower, and hopefully I'll be able to grab some seed from those to spread around to get a few more onion greens. And I think they're mostly the spring onions, so they're not really the bulbing onion sort. And I might even grab some to make a big batch of onion salt from. And the final bed of my garden that I'm yet to show you is this one here, which has got some leeks growing in it, and some of the leeks are starting to flower, which I love to see. I've also got lots of parsnip growing in this bed. I did have a seeding plant nearby, so it's spread all of these lovely plants out, and if I just come around and thin them, I should get a good crop of parsnips. Well, as you can see, the garden's just been left to do its own thing, and it's looking, well, not too bad. Plenty of weeds still to get out, but hopefully I'll get to them. But for the moment, let's head to the house and I'll show you what I've been doing there. Now, if you don't know what I'm doing here in the house, please check out my last video. I think it was titled, So This Has Been Happening. And at the end of that video, I'll explain why I'm needing to renovate my house. But let's go in and I'll show you what's been happening. First of all, you can see that in my kitchen there's a lot more light. This wasn't removed because of the mould, but just because it's been on my wish list forever. I'm hoping to just open up this space and turn this into a dining area. I'll have my living area, and then hopefully this will be where I have a desk for my computer and maybe a little craft zone with an open area around the fireplace. But it's areas like this, which is in the corner of that room, that I've had to open up. There's been mould in through there and all along here. What I did find when I opened this up was that the The plasterboard was right down to the slab, so all that paper on the plasterboard has soaked up moisture and has grown mould. You can see here in what was the cupboard area, that's what I mean. It was right down, sitting on the slab. In the middle of the slab, it's dry, but it's where condensation comes down from the window and doesn't dry immediately, and then it kind of gets sucked up along here. And I found that this corner has been quite problematic. So what's got to happen, somehow, we've got to replace all these baseboards. This has got to go anyway, but yeah, we need to kind of dry that off. G'day, mate. Yeah, you're a good boy. Now looking down the hallway, you can see I've made a little wall through there and put plastic. So I'm living down the other end and made a makeshift kitchen down there while I work on this end. Now in behind this sealed off zone is where my problems really are. In behind here is my bathroom, and that's my toilet. And I did have a leak, a slow leak about 4 years ago, which I had repaired, and I left open all the doors, all the walls for it to dry before sealing it up. But of course that wasn't good enough, and moisture remained, and that's where a lot of mould, if you can see there how dark that timber is, that's all got to be replaced. This whole wall between the toilet and the bathroom has to be replaced, and the baseboards sort of along the back wall, which are still damp. Now I might take the opportunity to get a plumber in and get all that plumbing replaced, so I don't have the risk of leaking pipes for a while, and just get it all tidied up and cleaned up. And once everything's been demolished and the walls replaced and any water damaged framing replaced, I then leave it sit for a couple of weeks for dust to settle, do a dust sample which I send off, and it gets sent off to America for testing. It takes a couple of weeks for that, and once that comes back and it's sort of in levels of mould that's acceptable, then I can rebuild. Now, if it comes back and there's still issues with mould spores, then I would have to sort of rethink my plan and have a look and see if I've done the job properly. So there's a bit of a process with mould remediation, and it can take a little while. But anyway, I've started now, which I'm really relieved at, and moving forward. One thing I'm really loving about this renovation is removing this room here and seeing through to my vegetable garden. It just brings me joy. It also brings in a lot more light in the afternoons and just makes this space a lot more open. Well, that's it for this garden update. Now, I am anticipating being able to get out into the garden another couple of days this week before returning into the house to do some more here. So hopefully I'll get on top of a few of those areas and get them ready for planting. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye for now.